I'm Morgan, 28 years old, and 3 weeks ago, my father threw my mother's wedding gift to me onto the cold marble floor in front of 150 guests. The sound it made, that small, dull thud of worn leather hitting stone, is something I'll never forget. Neither will the words he shouted, "Garbage belongs with garbage." He was talking about my mother, about her gift, about me. What he didn't know, what none of us knew, was that the old, faded passbook he'd just humiliated contained something that would change everything I thought I understood about my family. When I took it to the bank a week later, the teller looked at me like I'd just walked out of a vault. She went pale. Then she whispered, "Ma'am, please don't leave." Before I tell you what happened next, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if this story resonates with you. And if you're watching from somewhere around the world, drop a comment telling me where you are and what time it is there. I'd love to know. Now let me take you back 2 months before the wedding, when everything started to unravel. My family wasn't poor. That's the first thing you need to understand. My father, Richard Donovan, owned a mid-sized real estate company in Connecticut. Not Fortune 500, but comfortable. He drove a Mercedes E-Class, collected Rolex watches, and made sure everyone at the country club knew exactly how self-made he was. Growing up in our 5-bedroom colonial in Greenwich, I learned early that success had a specific shape in my father's eyes. And it didn't look like me. "If you'd been born a boy," he told me once when I was 12, "I'd have someone to pass the business to." I was standing right there, his only child. Apparently not enough. My mother, Helen, existed in the margins of our house. She cooked, she cleaned, she smiled at dinner parties and laughed at my father's jokes. And every morning, she went to her part-time job at the local library, a job my father never missed an opportunity to mock. "What do you even do there?" he'd sneer. "Organize books nobody reads? Count dust?" She never defended herself, not once. She'd just nod, clear the dishes, and disappear into the kitchen. For years, I thought she was weak. I'm ashamed to admit that now, but it's true. I looked at her silence and saw surrender. I didn't understand what she was actually doing. I didn't understand anything. My father had a favorite phrase: "In this house, men decide, women execute." He said it like it was wisdom, like he was passing down some ancient truth instead of just cruelty wrapped in tradition. And for most of my life, I believed him. I believed that my mother had nothing, that she was nothing without him. I was so incredibly wrong. I met Daniel Mercer on a Tuesday in October during a field trip. I teach 3rd grade at Riverside Elementary. Yes, the career my father considers a waste of potential. I was chaperoning 23 8-year-olds through a construction site tour when I literally bumped into the architect explaining load-bearing walls. Daniel caught my elbow before I fell into a pile of lumber. His hands were warm. His smile was warmer. "Careful," he said. "This is a hard hat zone." I wasn't wearing a hard hat. Neither was my heart. We dated for 2 years before he proposed. 2 years of dinners where he actually asked about my day. 2 years of someone looking at me like I mattered, not for what I could provide, but for who I was. Daniel's family was different from mine in every way that counted. His father, Harold Mercer, ran Mercer Development, a commercial real estate firm that made my father's company look like a lemonade stand. But you'd never know it from how they treated people. The first time I met Harold and Catherine Mercer, they asked about my students. Not my family's net worth. Not my prospects. My students. "3rd grade is such a pivotal year," Catherine said, pouring me tea in their Manhattan penthouse. "That's when children really start to discover who they are." I almost cried. Nobody had ever talked about my work like it mattered before. When my father found out who Daniel's family was, something shifted. Suddenly, he was interested in my relationship. Suddenly, he wanted to meet my boyfriend. Suddenly, his daughter, the teacher, was making connections. He called me for the first time in 6 months the day after I announced my engagement, not to congratulate me, to ask about Harold Mercer's portfolio. I'll pay for everything, my father announced, 3 days after meeting Daniel's parents. I was sitting in his home office, the one with the mahogany desk and the framed photos of buildings he'd developed. He'd never invited me in here before. The leather chair creaked as he leaned forward, his eyes bright with something I'd never seen directed at me: interest. The whole wedding, venue, catering, flowers, everything. Consider it my gift. I should have been suspicious. My father had never spent more than $50 on my birthday presents. Suddenly he wanted to drop $80,000 on a wedding? But Daniel squeezed my hand under the table and whispered, "Maybe he's trying to change." I wanted to believe that. God, I wanted to believe that so badly. So I said yes. Within a week, my father had booked Westbrook Country Club, a venue he wasn't even a member of, but desperately wanted to be. He'd selected the caterer, the florist, the band. He'd designed invitations with gold foil lettering that cost more than my monthly salary. The guest list had 150 names. I recognized maybe 30 of them. Business associates, my father explained when I asked. Important people. Important to whom? The night before the invitations went out, my mother found me in the garden. She moved quietly, like she always did, appearing beside me like a ghost. "Morgan," she said softly, pressing something into my hand. "I have a gift for you, too. But I'll give it to you on your wedding day." I looked down. Her fingers were wrapped around mine, warm and trembling. "It's the most important thing I have," she whispered. "Remember that. No matter what anyone says." I didn't understand then, but I would. The morning of the wedding, I sat in my childhood bedroom and thought about my mother. There's a memory I'd almost forgotten. I was 15, homesick from school, wandering the house in my pajamas. I'd gone looking for crackers in the kitchen and heard something from my parents' bedroom. Counting. My mother's voice, soft and rhythmic, like a lullaby made of numbers. I'd crept to the doorway and peeked inside. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, a small notebook in her hands, a stack of bills on the comforter beside her. Not a lot of money, maybe a few $100s, but she was counting it like it was gold. When she saw me, her face changed. Not guilty exactly. Something else. Something I couldn't name. "Just grown-up things," she'd said, tucking the notebook into the old oak jewelry box that had belonged to her mother. "Nothing to worry about." I never asked about it again. Kids don't, do they? We assume our parents' secrets don't concern us. But sitting in that same bedroom 15 years later, watching the morning light stream through the curtains, I wondered, what had she been saving for, and why did she have to hide it? My mother knocked on the door at 9 o'clock, holding a garment bag with my borrowed Vera Wang inside. "Are you ready?" she asked. I wasn't. Not for any of it. But I smiled and stood and let her help me into the dress that my father had insisted on. White silk and imported lace, elegant and expensive, and nothing like what I would have chosen for myself. "You look beautiful," my mother said, her eyes wet. I didn't know then that she was saying goodbye to the life she'd endured for me. Westbrook Country Club looked like something from a magazine. White roses cascaded from crystal vases. A string quartet played Vivaldi near the fountain. 300 chairs arranged in perfect rows on the manicured lawn, each one draped with silk ribbons that matched my bouquet. And at the center of it all, my father. I watched him from the bridal suite window, directing vendors like a general marshalling troops. "Move that table, adjust those flowers. No, the champagne tower goes there." He was wearing a Tom Ford suit I'd never seen before, charcoal gray, perfectly tailored. New cufflinks glinted at his wrists. He looked expensive. He looked important. He looked like someone playing a role. "Your father's really outdone himself," said my maid of honor, Sarah, peering over my shoulder. "I've never seen him so involved." That was one word for it. When the Mercer's car pulled up, a understated black sedan, not the flashy arrival my father would have chosen, I watched him transform. His posture straightened. His smile widened. He crossed the lawn with his hand extended before Harold had even closed the car door. "Harold! Catherine! Welcome! Welcome!" He was using a voice I didn't recognize. Warmer, softer. The voice of a man who wanted something. From the corner of my eye, I saw my mother standing alone near the rose garden. She was wearing the champagne-colored dress my father had selected for her, not the deep blue she'd wanted. And her smile looked painted on. She caught my eye through the window. For just a moment, something passed between us, something sad and knowing. Then my father's voice boomed across the lawn. "Let me give you the grand tour," and my mother's face went blank again. The ceremony was beautiful. I know that sounds strange, given everything that came after. But standing at the altar with Daniel's hands in mine, watching his eyes fill with tears as I said, "I do," that part was real. That part was ours. "I love you," he whispered as he slid the platinum band onto my finger. "No matter what happens, remember that." I didn't know then why he said it that way. Like a warning. Like a promise against something coming. The minister pronounced us married. Daniel kissed me softly, and 150 people applauded, most of them strangers my father had invited. I looked out at the crowd during that kiss. My father was beaming at Harold Mercer, not at me. He was already calculating, already networking, already using my wedding as a business opportunity. And in the front row, my mother sat alone. Her eyes were red. Her hands were clasped in her lap so tightly her knuckles had gone white. She wasn't smiling. "Mom's been crying all day," I murmured to Daniel as we walked back up the aisle. He squeezed my hand. "Wedding emotions. It's normal." But something in my chest said it wasn't normal. Something said my mother wasn't crying from happiness. At the cocktail hour, I watched her hover near the edges of conversations, always alone, always watching my father work the room. Once, she reached out to touch his arm, and he shook her off without even looking. "Not now, Helen." 3 words, spoken like she was a fly buzzing near his champagne. She withdrew her hand slowly, carefully, like she'd learned to make herself small. I should have gone to her then. I didn't. That's something I'll regret forever. The reception started at 7, and by 8, my father was drunk. Not falling down drunk. Richard Donovan would never embarrass himself that obviously. But the kind of drunk where his voice got louder and his stories got bigger and the truth got flexible. I watched him corner Harold Mercer near the Dom Perignon Tower, gesturing expansively with a champagne flute. 15 million in revenue last year, I heard him say. We're expanding into commercial, big things coming. I knew for a fact his company had done maybe 3 million. Maybe. Harold's face remained politely neutral, but I saw him exchange a glance with Catherine. The kind of glance married people share when they're both thinking the same thing and don't want to say it. "Your father seems enthusiastic," Catherine said, appearing beside me at the dessert table. I wanted to apologize, to explain, to somehow separate myself from the performance happening across the room. "He's excited about the wedding," I managed. Catherine touched my arm gently. "I'm sure he is, dear." But her eyes said something different. Later, I'd learned that Harold had already done his research, that he knew exactly how big my father's company wasn't, that the whole charade had been transparent from the start. But in that moment, I just felt the slow creep of dread, the sense that something was building, pressure behind a dam. My father's laugh rang out too loudly. He clapped Harold on the shoulder like they were old friends. He was performing so hard I could almost see the sweat on his forehead. And my mother stood in the corner, watching, silent, waiting. For what, I didn't know. Not yet. "Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for the family gifts." The MC's voice cut through the champagne chatter and guests began drifting toward their seats. This was my father's favorite part. He'd been planning his presentation for weeks. He took the stage first, naturally. "Daniel, Morgan," he began, his voice carrying that artificial warmth I'd come to recognize. "From the Donovan family to yours, a check for $50,000 for your future." He held up an envelope made of Italian leather, embossed with gold. The guests applauded. I smiled the smile I'd learned from my mother. Pleasant, empty, expected. $50,000 we both knew he'd borrowed against his credit line. $50,000 that was really an investment in Harold Mercer's good opinion. "Thank you, Dad," I said, because that was my line. Harold Mercer went next, his approach completely different. No fanfare, no performance. He simply handed Daniel a small Tiffany blue box. "A key," he said simply, "to a brownstone in Brooklyn Heights. It was Catherine's grandmother's place. We thought you two might like to start your life there." The room went quiet. A brownstone in Brooklyn Heights was worth— I couldn't even calculate it. I watched my father's face. For just a moment, a split second, his mask slipped. I saw the comparison register. Saw him understand that his $50,000 check had just been completely eclipsed. His jaw tightened. His smile became something else. "How generous," he said, his voice just slightly too sharp. And then the MC called the next name. "And now, from the mother of the bride, Helen Donovan." My mother rose from her seat, and I saw she was holding something small, something worn, something old. My stomach dropped. I didn't know why. Not yet. My mother didn't use the microphone. She walked to where Daniel and I sat at the head table, her steps careful, measured. In her hands was a small book, maybe 5 inches by 3, bound in faded blue leather that had worn soft at the corners. "Morgan," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The room had to strain to hear her. "This is my gift to you." She pressed the book into my hands. It was a passbook, an old-fashioned bank passbook, the kind they stopped issuing decades ago. First National Bank was stamped in gold letters on the front, though the gold had mostly flaked away. "I don't understand," I started. "This is everything I have," my mother said. Her eyes were wet, but her voice was steady. "Everything I've saved. I want you to have the freedom I never had, the freedom to make your own choices." I turned the passbook over in my hands. It weighed almost nothing. Behind me, I heard whispers from the guests. "A savings book? That's it? How old is that thing?" I didn't care. Something about the way my mother was looking at me, fierce and tender and desperately hopeful, made my throat tight. "Thank you, Mom," I said, and pulled her into a hug. "Thank you." "Don't let anyone tell you it's worthless," she whispered against my ear. "Promise me, whatever anyone says, don't throw it away." I didn't understand the warning, but I nodded. "I promise." She pulled back, and for just a moment, she looked like a different person. Stronger, younger, like the woman she might have been if life had been kinder. Then my father's voice shattered everything. "What is that supposed to be?" My father was standing now, his chair pushed back so hard it nearly toppled. His face was flushed, from the alcohol, from the embarrassment of being outdone by Harold's gift, from something darker I couldn't name. "Helen." He said her name like it was poison. "What the hell is that?" My mother didn't answer. She just stood there, hands clasped, eyes down. He crossed the room in 4 strides. Before I could react, he'd snatched the passbook from my hands. "A savings book?" He laughed. But it wasn't laughter. It was something cruel wearing laughter's face. "You gave our daughter a savings book? In front of the Mercers?" "Richard, please," my mother started. 30 years. He wasn't whispering anymore. His voice filled the ballroom, bouncing off the crystal chandeliers, the silk-draped walls. 30 years of marriage, and this is what you contribute? This worthless piece of— He threw it. The passbook hit the marble floor with a sound like a slap. It skidded across the stone, coming to rest near the base of a rose arrangement. "Garbage belongs with garbage," my father roared. The silence that followed was absolute. 150 people sat frozen. Forks hovered over plates. Champagne glasses stopped halfway to lips. The string quartet had gone silent. I heard Catherine Mercer inhale sharply. Heard someone, maybe Harold, set down a glass with a careful click. My mother stood motionless, tears streaming down her face. Silent, accepting,
like she'd been trained to take this. "You've embarrassed me for the last time," my father continued, turning to the room like he expected applause. "I apologize to our guests for my wife's pathetic display. The Donovans are better than this." He adjusted his Tom Ford jacket, smoothed his hair, smiled at Harold Mercer like nothing had happened. And in the terrible silence, my mother whispered something so soft that only I could hear. "I'm sorry, Morgan. I'm so sorry." She was apologizing to me. After everything he'd just done, she was apologizing. Something inside me snapped. Daniel's hand found mine under the table. His fingers were trembling, not from fear, but from the effort of holding himself back. "I'm going to," he started. "Don't." My voice came out steadier than I felt. "Don't give him what he wants." I could feel Daniel's rage like heat radiating off him. His jaw was clenched so tight I thought he might crack a tooth. His free hand had curled into a fist on the tablecloth. "Morgan, I know." I knew what Daniel wanted to do. Wanted to cross that room and put my father through the ice sculpture. Wanted to defend my mother's honor, my honor, in front of everyone who'd just witnessed the ugliest moment of my life. But I'd grown up with Richard Donovan. I knew how this played. If Daniel hit him, my father would be the victim. If Daniel yelled, my father would seem reasonable by comparison. Violence would give him exactly what he wanted, a distraction, a way to reframe the narrative. Instead of the man who'd just screamed at his wife over a savings book, he'd become the father-in-law who'd been attacked at his daughter's wedding. I wouldn't give him that satisfaction. Across the room, Harold Mercer was standing up. His face had gone cold, the warmth from earlier completely gone. "Catherine," he said quietly, "I think we should leave." "Yes," his wife agreed immediately. "I think we should." My father's smile faltered. "Harold, please, this is just a family matter." "Mr. Donovan," Harold's voice could have frozen the champagne. "I've seen enough to understand exactly what kind of man you are." They began gathering their things. And on the floor, near the roses, my mother's gift lay abandoned. Garbage, my father had called it. He had no idea. I released Daniel's hand. "Morgan?" His voice was worried. "What are you—" "Trust me." I stood up slowly. Every eye in the room tracked my movement. The silk of my wedding dress whispered against my legs as I stepped down from the head table. My father turned toward me, his face shifting through emotions. Confusion, irritation, the beginning of another tirade. I walked past him. My heels clicked against the marble. 1 step, 2, 3. The passbook lay where it had fallen, its faded blue cover stark against the white stone floor. One corner had bent from the impact. I bent down, picked it up, and brushed it off carefully, gently, like it was made of glass. When I straightened, I didn't look at my father. I walked to my mother, who stood frozen near the wall, tears still wet on her cheeks. "Thank you, Mom," I said, loud enough for the room to hear. "This is the most meaningful gift I've ever received. I'll treasure it forever." I kissed her cheek, felt her trembling. Then I turned to Daniel, who was already on his feet. "We're leaving," I said. "Where do you think you're going?" My father's voice cracked on the words. "The reception isn't over. You're embarrassing me in front of—" I stopped, turned just enough to see him from the corner of my eye. "I don't need your permission, Dad. And I don't need your approval." My voice was calm, steady, a voice I hadn't known I possessed. "What I need is to leave. So that's what I'm doing." Daniel took my hand. Together, we walked toward the door. Behind us, my father was still shouting. Something about disrespect, something about everything he'd done for me. I didn't hear any of it. I just kept walking. The brownstone in Brooklyn Heights was quiet. Harold and Catherine had given Daniel the key months ago, but we'd planned to save it for after the honeymoon. Instead, it became our refuge on our wedding night. Daniel ordered Thai food. Neither of us ate much. I sat on the window seat, still in my wedding dress. I hadn't had the energy to change,
and watched the lights of the city blur through the glass. The passbook sat on the cushion beside me, its worn leather warm from my hand. "You don't have to look at it tonight," Daniel said softly. "Whatever's in there can wait." "I know." But I couldn't stop touching it, running my fingers over the embossed letters, wondering what my mother had meant by freedom. "She stayed for me," I said suddenly. "All those years, she stayed for me." Daniel sat down beside me, careful not to disturb the passbook. "You don't know that for sure." "I do." And somehow, I did. The way she'd looked at me today. The way she'd said, "I want you to have the freedom I never had." It wasn't just about money. It was about choices, about being trapped so long you forget there's a world outside the cage. "What do you want to do?" Daniel asked. "I don't know yet." But that wasn't entirely true. There was one thing I knew for certain. "My mother told me to go to the bank," I said. "First National, the Greenwich branch. She said to ask for a Mr. Patterson." Daniel was quiet for a moment. "Tomorrow?" I nodded. "Tomorrow." Through the window, the Manhattan Bridge glittered in the distance. Somewhere out there, my father was probably still raging. I didn't care anymore. I was done letting him control my life. My phone started buzzing at 6 in the morning. 17 missed calls, all from the same number. The voicemails ranged from fury to desperation, cycling back and forth like a broken record. First message: "You humiliated me in front of everyone, in front of Harold Mercer." Third message: "I'm cutting you out of the will. You'll get nothing." Seventh message: "Morgan, sweetie, Dad's sorry, okay? Dad had too much champagne. Let's talk about this." 12th message: "You ungrateful little—" I stopped listening. Daniel watched me block the number, his coffee growing cold in his hands. He didn't try to talk me out of it. "My mother texted," I said, pulling up the message. Her words were brief, careful, like she'd thought about each one. "My dearest Morgan, I'm so sorry for what happened. Your father doesn't know what he threw away. Go to First National Bank, Greenwich branch. Ask for Mr. Thomas Patterson. Show him the passbook. He'll explain everything. I love you more than you will ever know. Mom." I read it 3 times. "What do you think it means?" Daniel asked. "I don't know." I looked at the passbook on the coffee table, its faded cover innocuous in the morning light. "There's an account number inside, a few old deposits. The last one was in 2003. The balance says $847. Daniel frowned. "That's not nothing. But it's not exactly life-changing." "No. But my mom said it's the most important thing she has." I picked up the passbook, feeling its weight, or lack of weight, in my palm. "And she said to go to the bank." So that's what I was going to do. Whatever secrets my mother had been keeping, I was about to find out. First National Bank's Greenwich branch looked like it had been there since before the town existed. Stone columns framed the entrance. Brass fixtures glowed in the morning sun. The kind of old money elegance that made my father's McMansion ambitions look exactly as desperate as they were. Daniel held my hand as we walked through the revolving doors. Inside, the air smelled like leather and old paper. Tellers in crisp uniforms worked behind mahogany counters. A security guard nodded at us politely. "Can I help you?" A young woman, her nameplate said Emily, smiled at us from the first window. "I have a Passbook account," I said, sliding the worn leather booklet across the counter. "I'd like to check the balance." Emily took it with a slightly puzzled look. Passbooks were relics of another era, but she scanned the account number into her computer without comment. Then her face changed. I've replayed that moment 1,000 times in my memory. The way her eyes went wide, the way her fingers stopped moving, the way she looked at the screen, then at me, then back at the screen. I'm sorry, could you excuse me for just one moment?" She didn't wait for an answer. She pressed a button under her counter and disappeared through a door marked "Employees Only." Daniel's hand tightened on mine. "What just happened?" "I don't know." But my heart was pounding.
Something was wrong, or something was very, very right. Through the door, I could hear muffled voices, then footsteps. Then the door opened again, and a silver-haired man in a three-piece suit emerged. He looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. "Mrs. Mercer?" he said. "I'm Thomas Patterson, branch manager. Would you please come with me?" He gestured toward a door marked Private Banking. "And please," he added quietly, "don't leave." Let me pause here for just a moment. If you've ever been made to feel small by someone who was supposed to love you, if you've ever been told that your dreams weren't worth pursuing or that your contributions weren't valuable, I want you to know you're not alone. And sometimes the things that look the most ordinary are hiding something extraordinary inside. What do you think was in that account? Drop your guess in the comments before we continue. Now, back to the bank. The private banking section was nothing like the public lobby. Persian rugs, oil paintings, leather chairs that probably cost more than my annual salary. Mr. Patterson led us to a mahogany desk and gestured for us to sit. "May I?" He held out his hand for the passbook. I gave it to him. He opened it carefully, reverently, and typed the account number into his computer. For a long moment, he just stared at the screen. "Mrs. Mercer," he said finally, "do you know what this is?" "A savings account," I said. "My mother gave it to me, at my wedding." "It's more than that." He turned the monitor so I could see it. "This passbook is the key to a trust account that was established 25 years ago. Your mother is the settlor. You've been the designated beneficiary since birth." I looked at the screen. I couldn't process what I was seeing. "The current balance," Mr. Patterson continued, his voice gentle, "is $2,147,893.41. The room tilted. "I'm sorry, what?" $2.1 million, Mrs. Mercer. Mr. Patterson folded his hands on the desk. "Your mother has been building this fund for 25 years. Monthly deposits from her employment, careful investments managed by our team, and an initial contribution of $200,000 from an inheritance she received in 1999. 200, I couldn't breathe. My grandmother left her, Margaret Wilson, yes. The inheritance was her separate property, legally distinct from any marital assets. Your mother invested it wisely and added to it over time." He paused. "She came to see me every year on your birthday, without fail, to check on the account, to ensure everything was in order." I was crying. I didn't know when I'd started. Daniel's arm wrapped around me, but I couldn't feel it. My mother. My quiet, overlooked, useless mother. She'd been building my freedom for 25 years, and nobody had known. "I don't understand," I managed through my tears. "How is this possible? My father, he controlled everything. How did she hide this from him?" Mr. Patterson's expression was sympathetic, but careful. "I can only tell you what I know, Mrs. Mercer. Your mother opened this account before I was branch manager. My predecessor established the relationship, but she's been very methodical." He pulled a folder from his desk drawer. "The inheritance from your grandmother was classified as separate property under Connecticut law. Your mother never commingled it with marital assets. She kept it in her maiden name trust, Helen Wilson, not Helen Donovan." "But her job," I said. "She worked part-time at a library, at an accounting office. My father said it was worthless. He said she was wasting her time." "Her deposits were modest but consistent. 20 years of compound interest and conservative investments added considerably to the principal." He showed me a graph, a line climbing steadily upward over decades. "She also took a portion of household money, small amounts, over time. Nothing that would be noticed. But it accumulated. Grocery money, household allowance, the cash my father threw at her like she was a servant being paid. She'd saved it, all of it." "There's something else," Mr. Patterson said. He slid an envelope across the desk, cream-colored, sealed with wax. My mother's handwriting spelled my name on the front. "She left this in the file, to be opened only when you came to claim the account. My hands shook as I broke the seal. Inside was a single page covered in my mother's elegant script. My dearest Morgan, if you're reading this, you've found your freedom. This money is yours, not your father's, not any man's. It's yours to do with as you please. I stayed because I wanted you to have a stable home, but I was never truly trapped. I was preparing. All my love, Mom. I read the letter 3 times before I could speak. She wasn't weak, I whispered. All those years I thought she was just accepting it, taking his abuse, letting him treat her like nothing. Mr. Patterson was quiet, giving me space. She was playing the long game. Daniel's voice was full of wonder. 25 years, and he never knew. There's additional documentation, Mr. Patterson said carefully. I'm not certain if you're aware, but your parents have had a legal separation agreement in place for approximately 20 years. I looked up sharply. A what? A separation agreement. They remained in the same residence, but your mother's financial and legal interests were protected. It was unconventional. He hesitated. I believe she stayed for you, Mrs. Mercer, until you were grown, until you were safe. 20 years. 20 years of sharing a house with a man who mocked her, dismissed her, made her feel like nothing. And the whole time, she'd had an escape hatch, a plan, but she'd stayed, because of me. I need to call her, I said, reaching for my phone. I dialed with shaking hands. She picked up on the first ring. Morgan? Did you go to the bank? Mom. I was crying again. Mom, why didn't you tell me? All those years, why didn't you ever tell me? Her voice was thick with tears, too. Because you were a child, and children shouldn't have to carry their parents' secrets. You needed to believe in the family, even if the family was broken. You needed stability. You sacrificed everything. No, sweetheart. I sacrificed nothing. I invested. She laughed softly, wetly. I invested in you. And now it's time for us both to be free. That word again. Freedom. For the first time, I understood what she meant. What do you want to do now, Mom? The question hung in the air between us, between two women who had both spent their lives under Richard Donovan's shadow. I want to leave, she said. The words came out like an exhale, like something she'd been holding in for decades. I've already spoken to my lawyer. The divorce papers are ready. They've been ready for years. Years. She'd been waiting, planning, biding her time until I was safely out of that house, safely married, safely beyond his reach. I have an apartment, she continued. Small, but it's mine. Near the library in New Haven. I've been paying rent on it for 2 years, just waiting. 2 years? I told you, Morgan. I was preparing. There was a smile in her voice now. Not bitter, not sad, but something like triumph. Your father never looked at the household accounts closely. He thought money was beneath him. He just handed me cash and expected me to make it work. So she had. She'd made it work in ways he never imagined. What about you? She asked. What do you want to do with the money? I looked at Daniel, who was watching me with quiet support. At Mr. Patterson, who was pretending not to listen while organizing papers. At the letter in my hands, 25 years of love, compressed into a single page. I don't want to use it for revenge, I said slowly. I don't want to rub it in his face or humiliate him. No. No. I folded the letter carefully, placed it back in its envelope. I just want to live my life, without him in it, without his approval, without his money, without his voice in my head telling me I'm not enough. My mother was quiet for a moment. Then she said, That's exactly what I hoped you'd say. 1 week after the wedding, my mother started packing. I wasn't there when my father found out, but she told me about it later, in that quiet, factual way she'd developed over 30 years of marriage. He came home early, found her in the bedroom with a Samsonite suitcase open on the bed.
What the hell do you think you're doing? She didn't stop folding. I'm leaving, Richard. I've filed for divorce. You'll be served papers by the end of the week. He laughed. That cruel, dismissive laugh I'd heard my whole life. With what? You don't have anything. You've never had anything. We've been legally separated for 20 years, my mother said calmly. I have my own assets, my own lawyer, my own future. That's impossible. I would have known.
You didn't ask. She closed the suitcase with a click. You never asked about anything that didn't directly benefit you. So no, Richard. You didn't know. His face went purple. She told me she'd never seen him so angry, and that for the first time in 30 years, she wasn't afraid. You'll come crawling back, he spat. You don't have a penny to your name. You'll be homeless in a month. My mother picked up her suitcase, walked to the bedroom door. Goodbye, Richard, she said. I hope you find whatever it is you've been looking for in other people's admiration, because you certainly won't find it in your family anymore. She walked out. He stood in that empty bedroom, surrounded by the expensive furniture he'd bought to impress people, and realized, perhaps for the first time, that he was completely alone. Not because he'd been abandoned, because he'd driven everyone away. My phone rang at 9 p.m. that night. I'd unblocked my father's number, not because I wanted to talk to him, but because I wanted to know when he finally understood what he'd lost. Morgan. His voice was ragged. What did you do? What did you tell your mother? Nothing, Dad. I kept my voice level. Mom made her own choice. She said she has money. That's impossible. She's never had. You must have given her something. You and that Mercer family, you must have. This isn't about the Mercers. This isn't about me. I took a breath. Mom has been preparing for this for 20 years. You just never noticed because you never looked at her. Not really. Silence on the line. She can't do this to me, he said finally. I need you to talk to her. Tell her I'll change. Tell her I'll. Dad, I cut him off. You had 30 years to change. You had 30 years to treat her like a person instead of a servant. You chose not to. Morgan, I'm your father. Yes, you are. And I'll always be grateful for the roof over my head and the food on the table growing up. I paused. But I don't owe you my mother's life. I don't owe you my silence. And I definitely don't owe you forgiveness you've never asked for. If you don't fix this, his voice turned hard, you'll get nothing, not a cent. I'll cut you out of everything. I almost laughed. Dad, I said, I don't need anything from you. Not anymore. I hung up. Then I blocked his number again. My hands were shaking, but my heart was steady. I had set a boundary, and the sky hadn't fallen. 2 weeks later, Harold and Catherine came for dinner. It was supposed to be a quiet evening, wine, pasta, and getting to know each other without the chaos of the wedding hanging over us. Daniel made his grandmother's lasagna. I set the table with the nice dishes we'd gotten as gifts. We were just sitting down when the doorbell rang. I knew before I opened it. Call it instinct. Call it 30 years of living with unpredictability. I just knew. My father stood on the stoop, holding flowers and a bottle of wine. His smile was plastered on tight. Morgan, I was in the neighborhood and thought, you're not invited, Dad. Behind me, I heard Daniel's chair scrape back, heard Harold's voice, low and tense. Just 5 minutes. My father's smile flickered. I want to apologize, for the wedding, for everything. Can't a father make amends? This isn't the time. Please, his voice cracked. I need to talk to Harold, just for a moment. There's been a misunderstanding. And there it was, the real reason. Even now, in what he was presenting as an apology, his primary concern was salvaging his relationship with Harold Mercer, with the business opportunity Harold represented. Mr. Donovan? Harold appeared behind me, his voice cold as January. I don't believe we have anything to discuss. Harold, please, the wedding was a misunderstanding. I'd had too much to drink. I watched you throw your wife's gift on the floor and call it garbage. Harold's tone didn't change. I watched you humiliate your family in front of 150 people. That wasn't alcohol, Mr. Donovan. That was character. My father's face went from pleading to furious in a heartbeat. You don't understand. You don't know what I've had to deal with. That woman has been useless for 30 years. Dad? Daniel stepped forward now, positioning himself between my father and the rest of us. You need to leave. Now. The flowers fell to the ground. My father stood there breathing hard, looking at all of us arrayed against him. He had no moves left. You don't understand what I did for this family. My father's voice had reached that pitch I remembered from childhood, high and sharp and dangerous. The voice that used to make my mother flinch, the voice that used to make me hide in my room. But I wasn't hiding anymore. I built everything, he jabbed a finger at me. The house, the company, your whole life. And you repay me by turning my own wife against me, by embarrassing me in front of— He gestured wildly at Harold. People who matter? Harold's expression didn't change. People who matter? Yes, important people. I spent $80,000 on that wedding specifically to— He stopped. I watched the realization dawn in Harold's eyes, the pieces clicking together. Specifically to what, Mr. Donovan? Harold's voice was silk over steel. To impress me? To create a business relationship? My father's mouth opened, closed, opened again. You spent $80,000 of borrowed money, Harold continued quietly, to put on a show. Not for your daughter, for me. For what you thought I could do for your company. That's not— I never— And when your wife who has apparently been quietly saving for 2.5 decades, gave your daughter the most meaningful gift of the night, you threw it on the floor. Harold shook his head. Because it didn't fit your performance. Catherine put a hand on her husband's arm. I think we've seen enough, dear. Yes. Harold looked at my father one last time. Mr. Donovan, I don't do business with men who treat their families as props. Please don't contact me again. The door closed in my father's face. Through the wood, I heard him standing there, breathing, processing the death of everything he'd tried to build. Then, slowly, footsteps retreating. He was gone. Can I be honest with you for a moment? Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's not screaming. It's not exposing. It's just stepping back and letting someone reveal who they really are. My father had every opportunity to apologize, to change. Instead, he told Harold Mercer exactly what he'd been doing all along. Before I finish this story, I want to ask you, have you ever had to walk away from someone you loved to protect yourself? Tell me in the comments. Now let me tell you what happened next. The fallout was quiet but devastating. My father never got his meeting with Harold Mercer. No partnership, no investment, no entry into the world of real development he desperately wanted to join. But that wasn't the worst of it. The story spread, not dramatically. There were no headlines, no social media exposés, just whispers, the way things travel in small Connecticut business circles. Did you hear what happened at the Donovan wedding? Apparently he threw his wife's gift on the floor. The Mercers left before the cake was cut. Within months, 2 deals my father had been pursuing fell through. Nothing official, just politely declined meetings, unreturned phone calls, lunch dates that never got scheduled. His company didn't collapse. He wasn't ruined. But the doors he'd spent decades trying to open, they were closed now, quietly, firmly, permanently. I didn't take any pleasure in it. Okay, maybe a little, but mostly, I just felt tired. Tired of the decades of performance. Tired of the lies and the manipulation and the constant, exhausting effort to earn approval from someone incapable of giving it. My father called occasionally in those first few months. I never answered. He sent letters, long, rambling things that alternated between apology and accusation. I read the first one, threw away the rest. Don't you think you should talk to him? A colleague asked me once. He's still your father. I thought about that. He is, I agreed. And I don't hate him, but I don't need him in my life to love him from a distance. Some relationships are healthier with space. She didn't understand. That was okay. Most people don't understand until they've lived it, until they've had to build walls just to survive. My mother bloomed. There's no other word for it. In the months after she moved into her New Haven apartment, I watched her transform into someone I'd never met before. She cut her hair short, something my father had forbidden for 30 years. She painted her living room yellow, her favorite color, the one he'd called tacky. She volunteered at the library where she'd once worked, not for money now, but for joy. I forgot what it felt like, she told me over lunch one day, to make a decision and not have to defend it, to just be. The divorce finalized quietly. My father couldn't contest anything. The separation agreement had been ironclad for 2 decades. He got the house and the business. She got her freedom. She told me she'd started writing. A journal at first, then something more structured. 30 years of memories, observations, survival strategies. I'm thinking of turning it into a book, she said, almost shyly. A memoir, maybe, for other women in situations like mine. Mom. I took her hand across the cafe table. That's incredible. I don't know if anyone would read it. I would read it, and I think a lot of other people would too. I squeezed her fingers. You have a story worth telling. She smiled, a real smile, not the painted-on version I'd grown up watching. You know what I realized? She said. All those years, I thought I was weak for staying, for not fighting back. But I wasn't staying because I was weak. I was staying because I was building something. A future for you. And now, she gestured around at her small, sunny apartment. Now I get to build something for myself. It was the bravest thing I'd ever heard. People asked me what I was going to do with the money. $2 million, life-changing money, quit your job money, buy a mansion and never work again money. I kept teaching. I know. It sounds crazy, but here's the thing. I didn't become a teacher because I couldn't do anything else. I became a teacher because I love it. Because every day I get to watch 8-year-olds discover that they're capable of more than they thought. How could money replace that? But I did use it. Carefully, meaningfully. I worked with a financial advisor to establish a scholarship fund, the Margaret Wilson Education Fund, named for my grandmother, whose inheritance had started everything. Every year, it would help 5 students from low-income families attend college. Why not your name? Daniel asked when I showed him the paperwork. Because it's not about me. I signed the final document. It's about continuing what my mother started, using silence and patience and small, steady actions to change lives. We bought a house in Connecticut, not Greenwich, not my father's territory, but a quiet neighborhood where the schools were good and the neighbors waved hello. 3 bedrooms, a backyard, a kitchen big enough to cook Sunday dinners. And I started teaching a new unit to my 3rd graders, financial literacy. How to save. How to plan. How small actions, repeated over time, can build something enormous. They were too young to fully understand, but someday they would. You're really not going to quit? My friend Sarah asked, incredulous. Why would I quit? Because you could do anything, travel the world, start a business, buy a yacht. I laughed. What would I do with a yacht? She didn't get it. That was okay. The best things in life aren't measured in square footage or horsepower. My mother taught me that. My father and I haven't spoken in 18 months. He still calls sometimes, not often, but enough that I know he hasn't forgotten I exist. Birthdays, holidays, the occasional random Tuesday when he's probably had too much scotch and started thinking about legacy. I don't answer. I don't block him either. It's a strange position to hold, loving someone you can't be around, understanding them while refusing to accept their behavior, mourning a relationship that was never what you needed it to be. Will you ever forgive him? Daniel asked me once. I had to think about it. Forgiveness is a process, I said finally, not a moment. I'm working on letting go of the anger, the hurt, the years of feeling like I wasn't enough. I paused. But forgiveness doesn't mean letting someone back into your life so they can hurt you again. Those are 2 different things. So you won't see him? Maybe someday. For a funeral, a hospital visit. Something that requires family to show up regardless of history. I shrugged. But Thanksgiving dinners, birthday parties, introducing him to his grandchildren? I touched my stomach, too early to show, but we'd just found out. Not until he can demonstrate real change, and not just change for a week or a month, change that sticks. Some people thought I was being too harsh. Others thought I wasn't being harsh enough. Here's what I've learned. You can't make everyone happy. You can only make choices you can live with. And I could live with distance. I could live with boundaries. I could live with loving my father from afar while protecting myself and my family from his chaos. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. And sometimes, honest is the best you can do. 3 years later, I'm sitting in my kitchen, watching my daughter eat scrambled eggs. Her name is Margaret. Maggie for short. She has Daniel's eyes and my mother's stubborn chin and a laugh that fills every room she's in. My mother is here too, helping Maggie navigate the complex engineering of getting eggs onto a fork. She's 60 now, silver-haired and serene in a way I never saw growing up. She published her memoir last year. It didn't make the bestseller lists, but she's gotten dozens of letters from women who recognize their own stories in her words. Worth it, she told me, holding one of those letters. Even if it only helped one person, it was worth it. Daniel is making coffee, humming something under his breath. He's expanded his architecture practice to include pro bono work for community centers. Giving back, he calls it, paying forward the luck we've had. The Margaret Wilson Education Fund has now helped 43 students attend college. Last year, one of them sent me a thank you note that made me cry. "You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself," she wrote. "I didn't even know you, and you changed my life." I framed that letter. It hangs in my classroom. Through the window I can see the Connecticut afternoon, leaves turning gold, sunlight slanting through the trees. It's the kind of day that used to make me anxious, because perfect weather meant my father would want to entertain, and entertaining meant performing, and performing meant exhaustion. Now perfect weather just means perfect weather. "Mama," Maggie says, holding up her fork triumphantly, "I did it." "You did, baby. I'm so proud of you." My mother catches my eye across the table. She's smiling. We both are. I keep the passbook in a frame now. It hangs in our living room, near the window where the afternoon light catches the faded blue leather. Visitors sometimes ask about it. "Is that a savings book?" And I tell them the short version of the story. "It was my mother's gift," I say. "The most valuable thing she ever gave me." They always ask how much was in it. That's not the point I want to tell them. $2 million matters, yes. But what matters more is what it represented. 25 years of patience, 25 years of small, invisible actions building towards something enormous. 25 years of love expressed not through words, but through preparation. My mother didn't save me by swooping in at the last moment with a dramatic rescue. She saved me by planning year after year so that when I finally needed freedom, it was already waiting. That's the lesson I carry with me now. The people who truly love you don't always love loudly. Sometimes they love in silence, in persistence, in showing up again and again even when no one's watching. And the people who try to make you small, their power only lasts as long as you believe in it. The moment you step back, the moment you stop performing for their approval, you realize they were never as big as they seemed. They were just loud. My father called the passbook garbage. He threw it on the floor in front of everyone who mattered to him. He was wrong. The garbage wasn't the passbook. The garbage was the idea that love could be measured in performances, in impressions, in how much you could make other people admire you. Real love looks like my mother's savings book, worn, faded, easy to overlook, and worth more than everything my father ever tried to buy. If you're in a situation where someone makes you feel small, please know that you're not. You're just surrounded by people who haven't learned how to see you yet. One day, you'll find the ones who do, and everything will change. That's my story. Thank you for staying until the end.
Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. If this resonated with you, if you've ever had to walk away from someone you love to save yourself, I'd love to hear your story. Drop a comment below. I read every single one. And if you want to hear more stories like this, stories about quiet strength, unexpected justice, and the power of patience, please subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next one. The link to more stories is in the description below. Until next time, take care of yourself. You're worth it.